Welcome to American Education FM, everybody. I'm Dr. Sean Brooks. Ladies and gentlemen, in this episode, I have a conversation with a school teacher by the name of Sarah, and what she experienced during the entire COVID lie is an absolute nightmare. There's no doubt about it. She certainly isn't alone in this regard either. Again, everybody was abused whether they were awake or they were dead asleep, but she, of course, was very much awake, and she knew what was going on, and you'll hear exactly her entire process and everything that she experienced. Again, she experienced everything from the abusive school tactics among her coworkers and the administrators within the district where she worked, the blind compliance, the bullying that she personally experienced. They also engaged in Bolshevik tactics against her and taking pictures of her without her mask on and then turning her into administration. She also details at least one staff member dying from what is perceived to be the shots, certainly back, I believe, in 2021. She also goes into, again, the monetary coercion that even students experienced when it came to taking the shots and the child abuse, of course, that they experienced. Not to mention the workplace retribution that she experienced after attending the 2021 January 6th rally. In fact, after we talked, she emailed me this because I'm certain that this is a phenomenon that is not unique to just this one location. This is certainly happening within numerous school districts across the United States, but she said the following, quote, "Something I thought about after we spoke." She said, "I have seen numerous homosexuals placed in leadership positions in the various school districts I worked in. Those schools had a higher percentage of students who identified as trans." She said some of these students were in the 6th grade. "I got screamed at once by an administrator in one school because I had used the wrong pronoun when speaking about a student. I said she instead of they. I was glad I had the opportunity to work in different schools because it gave me a clearer understanding of which schools I should avoid." Unquote. Again, ladies and gentlemen, this is one hell of a story. Give this a listen if you can, spread it around if you're interested, and I will catch you on Wednesday. Peace.
I actually came into education by accident. I was working in restaurants and married to a math teacher, and we were trying to buy a house at the time, and he said, "Hey, why don't you use your college hours and come sub in my school during the day? Because working in restaurants, you only make money working at night." And I just discovered by accident that this was something I was really good at. So went back to school, got my certification, became a math teacher, and spent the first few years in the same school with him before I branched out. I have a 6 through 12 math certification. Started in the middle school, but then I moved on to the high school. I worked a few years in the alternative school. Before I had spent 3 years substituting, so I had pretty strong classroom management by the time I graduated and got my first teaching job. I spent 12 years working at the community college, teaching the developmental classes to get students prepared for college algebra, which is a lot of the same high school algebra 1 and algebra 2 that the adults have either forgotten or never really got it the first time. And right now, currently, I am in, now I'm not being, I guess I can say this district, I'm currently in HISD, which, as you know, has been taken over by the state. And surprisingly, I'm at a high school, and surprisingly, that's actually one of the places that I've been the happiest in my career. When COVID started, I was at the high school, and I was teaching geometry at the time.
When you started teaching, were there particular things that you were noticing about the environment or the profession that seemed off to you?
Well, we were constantly having to lower our standards. The standards were just so much higher, even when I was in school, even when I was finishing my college degree. You know, your grade was what you had earned. There was no curving. And so that was the most stressful part about teaching is having to lower the standards academically, and not just with academics, but also with behavior. I've really had to learn how to manage my own classes and get the most work out of them pretty much by myself without any help from anybody above me. And I mean, if you ask for help, if you have serious cases and you're asking for help, they're more likely to try to get rid of you. They'll blame the problem on you. The administrators are so afraid of losing their own position, because every time an assistant principal job comes up, and they have 600 applicants.
Yeah.
there's not an administrator shortage. There is a teacher shortage, and we have bosses who spent the minimal time in the classroom. They spent the minimal 3 years. Some of them were just elective or PE teachers, and they get promoted, and they don't really have even the experience to be able to guide the new teachers on how to effectively manage their classes.
What kind of workplace bullying did you experience?
Oh, I've been bullied. So just if you're ever in a position where you're having a bad day or you're having problems in your personal life, you don't go and ask for help. If you ask for help, they will eat you. They will chew you up and spit you out. I've seen even 2 teachers this year get non-renewed where I am, and maybe they were weak teachers, but they were brand new to the profession. And they didn't have anybody to guide them. There was absolutely no program to help them at all, and they got rid of them. So you really have to have a strong character, and you really have to have the skills to manage things yourself, or they will bully you, and they will blame you for everything until they get rid of you, or until you leave on your own.
Let me ask you this then. Let's get in a time machine and go back to 2020 and what was going on, certainly within your line of work and your working environment around March of 2020. How exactly did your school district react to everything?
Everything was fine. Everything was normal. Nobody was wearing a mask. I remember when we had our math meeting, I was teaching Algebra 2 at the time, so all the Algebra 2 teachers, they would put us, twice a semester, they'd put a sub in our classroom, and then we would meet all day and plan our curriculum. And I remember the subject of COVID came out in that meeting before spring break, and the teachers were saying, this is just so ridiculous. This is so ridiculous. More people die of the flu every year than of this thing. And so that was the general attitude of people. No one was making a big deal out of it. So when we went on spring break, fully expecting to come back, and we were told just before we were to return that we wouldn't be back for 2 weeks to slow the spread. So it was a surprise, but at the time, I think most of us just saw it as, hey, this is a nice little break. New parents got to spend time with their children. Families got to spend closer time together. So, sure, at the very beginning, it was great. I know our administrators I don't think they were expecting it either, because I could tell they were scrambling with the online program. They were scrambling to put one together. And it was my understanding that a lot of them had spent days and nights up there, just trying to put out some curriculum. I think maybe word had gotten to them that this might take a little longer than 2 weeks. So after that 2 weeks to slow the spread, we were up and running with a preliminary online program. We had to really dumb it down. And Algebra 2 is a very dense course with a lot of material. And what we were teaching was it was a joke. This was something students could do very easily, but we were told to do this. There were teachers that had tried to, push higher standards online, but all that had to happen is one student complained, and the teacher got a tongue lashing. So we had to dumb it down. Our students were pretty smart. They had online chat rooms where they just shared answers. So it was very little work for them and very little work for us. So I just took it at the time. I'm just going to relax. I'm going to get some work done around the house. I'm going to enjoy time with my dogs and just enjoy this extended break.
How long did that last? The online learning?
It lasted the rest of the school year. And then the following year, of course, they started the hybrid courses where we had students learning from home and we had students in the classroom. So talk about a head on a swivel. We're back and forth between the class and the students online. I think it was really backwards in the fact that the students that had to stay home during the school year were the ones that didn't want to wear a mask. When it should have been the opposite. It should have been the students that were afraid of COVID and were scared of getting sick. They should have been the ones that stayed home, because I guarantee you by then they were sick of staying home. They would have wanted to come back to work. And I think the mask would have come off a lot faster then.
So how about the staff members? How did the staff members deal with all of this? I mean, they came back wearing the masks. I mean, what were the conversations around them regarding all of this?
There were so many that were scared of this virus. I'll be honest, I bought into it too during the lockdowns. I didn't think in a million years that they would shut down schools unless there was something to fear. And I was watching President Trump's speeches very closely, and he was saying how this disease will rip your lung apart. And he had a close friend who was in the hospital that had ended up dying. So when we came back to school in August, they had laid down tape in all the hallways. All the hallways became one-way streets. You know, if you wanted to go this way, if you wanted to go left to right, you had to go down this hallway. If you want to go right to left, you had to go down the other hallway. Stairwells became, this stairwell is for going up only, this stairwell is for going down only. So it took a little longer to get from point A to point B in the building. The very first day of school, we come back and we're having our first staff meeting in the library. And of course, I'm pulling into the parking lot and I'm seeing, this is South Texas. And so in August, so it's 100 plus outside. And you're seeing all the football players outside practicing with masks on, just pouring down sweat. And I'm watching this thinking, that can't be healthy. I mean, we would have students brought from the heat anyway. So I can't imagine what it was like for them with the masks on. Come inside, and the principal's very first speech to us. And like I said, it's hot. It's hotter than can be outside. In the library, all the teachers are sitting there. There's not one sick person. There's not one sniffle. And the principal said we would wear masks all the time. That was non-negotiable. They were going to be on, and they were going to stay on as long as we were in that building and we were around students and even around each other. So we had to put them on, and we had to keep them on. And they had asked us if we had any concerns about wearing the mask. And I raised my hand. I said, I'm a little claustrophobic, so I'm not sure. I was fine as far as dashing in and out of stores. That wasn't a big deal at the time, but all day long, I wasn't sure I could do this. And he just said, yeah, well, that's understandable. I'm a little claustrophobic too, and then kind of dismissed me. But it was made very clear that we were to wear masks, and that was it. There were some teachers that were deathly afraid of this virus. They wouldn't let us sit too close to them. There were some that just went along to get along. This particular school, the teachers were pretty people pleasers. It was a good school. It was good students in a well-to-do neighborhood. And so it was considered a cream of the crop position to have. And so most of them did not want to rock the boat, or they were scared one way or the other. So I saw really a lot of their true personality come out of this. I just had concerns as far as, I don't know if I can do this all day long. And the first semester, I did, but I struggled. And every chance I got the lightest weight mask I could find. And I would lower it down to my chin or raise it above my nose just so I could breathe. But it was getting harder and harder to do. And we were ordered that we were to tell these students they would wear their mask at all times. And we were supposed to report them if they didn't. I had a problem with that. I saw students who were perfectly healthy that were coming in and saying they tested positive for COVID and they were going to have to go home for 2 weeks. And I thought, well, that's not safe. I saw students who had been home for 2 weeks. They were perfectly healthy. They were back for a few days. And then they said, oh, you tested positive for COVID again, or you sat next to someone. You were in close proximity of someone who had tested positive for COVID. You got to go home for 2 weeks. But after a while, Sean, I started to see a pattern here. They were targeting students that had taken their masks off and saying this foolish. They were using it as punishment. So that's when I really started to have a really bad feeling about this. Plus the fact that I was really struggling to keep this on all day and teach with it on. When I made it to Christmas break. Hallelujah! I made it to Christmas break, and I went to the January 6th gathering, and it was there. I had traveled. I had gone to Mexico. I go and get my dental work done there, and I had traveled on flights. I'd gone to Colorado. I had been places where I had not worn a mask, and I had just come to the realization that okay, I'm not getting sick. Plenty of places I've taken my mask off, and I'm not getting sick. But the real realization, and President Trump, I'll always be grateful to him for this, was being on a flight full of Trump supporters going to D.C. and coming back to D.C. And the airlines were really abusive to the passengers, but they're not going to be abusive to a flight full of Trump supporters. So that was the one flight. Those were the one flights that we actually took our mask off on. And it was that time that I realized that this was just foolishness, that there was nothing to fear. Our principal had sent out an email to everyone that had said that there was a vaccination site being set up. And I think this was actually dated January 1st. I've still got a copy of it. And that he thought that teachers would qualify for this, and he did not want us to miss out on this opportunity. And I realized that this whole masking was just, it was pushing us to get the vaccine. That all this abuse that we were all going through wasn't about the masks. You could see the principals and the assistant principals and everyone that didn't have students. They would sit in their offices all day long without their masks on. And then when one of us or a student came into their little office or their little space, they would make this big show of putting their mask back on their face. But I mean, by then it's obvious they're not afraid of this virus. And it's not about a virus. It's about forcing people to get this vaccine. And so I guess at that point was when I became really, really alarmed. And I was fed up at the same time. And the final straw for me, when I just said that, I'm not wearing this anymore, was we had a little teacher break room. And in this break room was also where a coffee machine was. And it was a tile floor. It was a white tile floor. And so, math teachers, we go in and out of that room all the time, go to the coffee machine. Well, with this mask, I couldn't see. It obstructed my vision below my chin. And there was water on the floor. And I slipped and fell on this floor. Fortunately, I didn't break anything. But I went down pretty hard where people were coming to check on me. And at that point, I said, that is it. I am not wearing this thing anymore. The last time I had a fall like that, I had broken an arm. So I did not want to repeat that. And so that's when I got on their radar and they really started watching me. They had aides in our classrooms. They made us measure, and I'm in a classroom with no windows, 30 students. And so, I mean, it's not an exaggeration to say we were squeezed in that room pretty tight. They made us take our seating chart and measure the distance between the desks vertically and horizontally in all of our classes with the students' names on the seating chart. And we had to turn it in. The nurse returned my seating chart to me. And I said, you didn't do this right. You didn't do this right. And I said, what's wrong? What did I do? And they said, no, you got to measure the desk horizontally or diagonally. I had to measure the desk diagonally. I hadn't done that. I mean, just absolutely ridiculous, and it just got to that point where, around December, January, it was just turning into harassment. Anytime a student, we had to give a copy of our seating charts to the aide that was in our room. And anytime a student took off their mask, he would turn in that name. And it wasn't long before that student would get a notice that they had sat in close proximity to someone who had tested positive for COVID, and they were being sent home for 2 weeks. You see, they were using it as punishment.
Let me ask you this just very quickly. I mean, clearly they were contact tracing, quote unquote. I mean, clearly they were doing that nonsense. Clearly they were pushing the fake COVID tests. Clearly they were masking. Did they ever isolate children and students, rather, in a particular section of the building? Like if they just started to randomly cough or if they sneezed or whatever. I mean, was there an isolation room in your building too?
There might have been an isolation room for the students that they said, oh, you will come in close proximity or you of somebody that tested positive, and they would call the parents to come pick their child up. And the parents at this point were really getting fed up, and a lot of them were refusing to pick up their child. And no, there's nothing wrong with them. I'm not coming to get them. And so I think that at that point they were put in these rooms, correct? I think they called them in school suspension, which was where they would sit all day.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, for that type of thing, yes, they did.
Regarding the vaccination, let me ask you this too. And again, I don't want to interrupt you because you're on a roll here. But regarding the vaccination itself, when you said that the school, of course, set up particular dates for people to come in, I mean, I assume that they had actual vaccinations taking place in your building?
The principal, well, it was first available to the staff members and for teachers. It was available for teachers before it was available for students. So he had found out places where you could get vaccinated, where teachers could get vaccinated. And our principal was emailing that information to the teachers. And like I said, a lot of teachers were people pleasers. You know, they didn't want to rock the boat, or they were truly scared of the virus. And so a lot of them went and got it at whatever these places were. Drive-through vaccination centers. A lot of them were in public parks around the school. Now, as far as offering vaccination, that email came out around April, I think, where they were bringing in those, what do you call it, those buses?
Yeah.
Those vaccination buses. And they were bringing those into locations near the schools where the students could get vaccinated.
What percentage do you think of your staff actually received them? And same thing with the administration.
I wouldn't be surprised. You know what? I take that back. I would guess the percentages are right up there with the nation's percentages. I would guess they're about 2/3. I got put on leave like I said, when I fell and I said, that's it, and I'm taking off the mask. I got a few warnings, but that aide that didn't work with the students, that was really a tattletale. He ran and told on me enough times when I was up teaching without a mask and taking pictures of me. I got put on leave in the middle of January. Oh, and there was something else I was doing too. When I realized that this was nothing to fear and we were headed right towards this forced vaccination, at the same time too, I was thinking if I just held on until the vaccine became available with these masks, that once the vaccine became available, I had it in my mind they weren't going to make us wear the mask anymore. Well, not only was that not true, but there was a mass email that came around all the way from the superintendent that said that they were going to vote whether or not the mask would be mandatory for the following school year. But they weren't letting us vote as individuals. They had selected a representative from every school to vote for us. So you know what that meant? That meant they were going to handpick their people and to represent us and say, yeah, that we wanted to wear the mask. So there was a lot of hands moving at that time where I just saw where this was headed, and this was bad. But I would definitely say 2/3 of them probably got vaccinated. The upper level student, same thing. I'd say about 2/3. It just depended on their parents. If their parents were dead set against it, then they weren't going to do it. I remember there was a particular teacher there that was going around asking people if they were going to get the vaccine. And this guy hadn't said 2 words to me all year long, but all of a sudden he's interested in whether or not I'm getting vaccinated. I got the distinct impression that the people upstairs, the people above him, had put him and probably others up to finding out who was going to get that shot or not, which is also something I had a problem with, and I told him I was not planning on it. I didn't, I probably should have just told him none of your business. But at the same time, I had realized at that point there was nothing to fear. We had that silly rule where if the students were eating, they could take their mask off. And so those first 2 weeks in January before they finally sent me home, I spent a fortune of my own money buying food. I bought kolaches. I bought snacks. I bought those Capri Suns by the case. I bought water by the case. I had, a pretty big refrigerator in my room. And I allowed the students to eat while they worked because I couldn't lecture them about wearing a mask or not. But because there were so many students taking off their masks to eat during lunch, I wanted them to see and come to the realization of their own that this was nothing to fear. And I think it was working. That was the best way. Students have got to make up their own mind whether or not there's something to fear. And I realized that. But I thought, if they take it off enough and they put food in their mouth and they put drinks in their mouth and they're seeing that they're not getting sick, they're going to come to the realization sooner than later that this is wrong. And maybe, just maybe, they won't get that shot. They got rid of me pretty quick after that too.
I believe it. Let me go back. Let me go back and ask you this. Clearly, they were engaging in Bolshevik tactics. Certainly in a way that I was very familiar with, but hearing it firsthand from you is beyond alarming. They were actually taking pictures of you. Or an employee of the building was taking pictures of you when you weren't wearing your mask and then turning that in to some administrator?
Oh yes, there's a big. I can give you an online copy, all 247 pages of what they used to non-renew me that year. And in that binder and in that online copy, there are pictures of me standing in front of the classroom teaching without a mask on.
And they used that as justification to get rid of you.
Mm-hmm. They used that and anything they could think of. They had questioned the students. You could just tell they had questioned them at length because they knew I had gone to D.C. And I did hear back from some of the people that really were more conservative types that, they were talking about you. A lot of them thought I had stormed the Capitol.
Oh, wow.
It's absolutely ridiculous if you know me.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was what they used to get rid of me. They had questioned the students at length about my political beliefs if I'd ever said anything. And I mean, so like I said, I can show you this. I said nothing, and you actually said, "Oh, she thought Trump was doing a good job, or she liked Trump. She didn't say anything about Biden." I mean, it's just a whole lot of this. And even my mentors and my friends and my family member that I've showed this to, they said this was just ridiculous. They had to stop reading because they had just filled up this binder with just fluff, anything they could think of to try to use as justification for getting rid of me. And I'll be happy to send you. I'll be happy to send you a copy of that. It's still unbelievable to this day, but since I saw who these people really were, I don't miss working for them. I'm a lot happier now.
Yeah, you should be. Let me ask you this then too, regarding just the shots in general, and certainly regarding your opinion on them. When you started to hear about people talking about these shots being created, and potentially people taking them, of course, at the end of 2020 and beginning of 2021, what were your opinions on all of that? Were you pretty much a staunch "I'm not going to take it no matter what" kind of person?
After January, I tried to be open-minded about it. A lot of people, a lot of my friends thought, well, if President Trump's supporting it, it can't be all that bad. But at the same time, I was researching it very deeply. And after D.C. and talking to and like I said, I will always be grateful for President Trump for bringing us together like that, talking to people that I would never normally talk to, finding out what was going on in the rest of the country. But my first thought was, let's not be the first to take it. Let's find out what it does to other people. And then probably, I guess, around the end of January, I really much had thought, I think this shot is the biological weapon. I think when President Trump says a biological weapon was released on this country, I think this shot is a biological weapon. The people I work for, they're not stupid. And they knew what they were doing. They knew these masks were not effective. I know they knew this. I know the fact they were sitting in their offices all day without their mask on, smirking. And I knew at this time I had put it together that the whole mask madness was to get everybody to get that shot. It was a warm up to get that shot. And so that shot itself was the biological weapon. And like I said, I was just stunned when I had all that time off between the middle of January and the rest of the year. And just, driving around the neighborhood, driving to the dog parks, they had turned a lot of the parks in the area into those drive-through vaccination centers. And I couldn't believe the crowds. I couldn't believe just this huge, what's this traffic jam? Oh my gosh, are you kidding? All these people want to be the first to get this shot. Wow, there really is a lot of fear. I had made friends with a lot of parents who were also conservatives. And of course, students talked to their parents, and the parents that had found out that I had gone to the January 6th, I got so many emails of support and good for you. And, in my office, you're the hero. And there was a lot of parents just in the civilian world that were dealing with customers coming into their office and screaming because one of the employees sitting in the back wasn't wearing a mask. I mean, just the entire town was just in this constant state of hysteria.
Let me ask you about jab injuries then. If approximately 70 to 75% of your staff at the time you believe took the shots, probably administrators as well, potentially, have you heard of any jab injuries, or were there any jab injuries after that?
Well, I was hoping you asked me this. After I was non-renewed to this district, and I was trying to decide what I wanted to do, I did not want to go through this again. And the schools. I mean, I live in an area in Texas where there's about 6 different districts, all within a 30-minute drive of me. I've worked at almost nearly all of them these last 4 years. But I decided to be a certified substitute because I wanted the flexibility where if I didn't like what this school was doing, I could just walk away.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't bound by a contract. And come to find out, one of these districts were paying $300 for certified teachers, $300 a day for certified teachers to sub in the school. And they had called me at the end of September. They had a long-term position, and the teacher, this particular teacher, was not going to be returning. And Sean, I honestly thought that this person, the way they said it, I thought, oh, this person got in trouble, this person got fired, or something happened in the school. Well, come to find out, end of September, I go to be a long-term sub in the school. This teacher that I replaced was 41 years old and had died in their sleep of a heart attack. I had just seen your school board speech just before that, and I thought, oh my goodness. Sean's right. This really is happening already. Here's one right now that passed away. They had taken the students and put them in a different classroom because they all knew she had passed away. This was the middle of September, and they didn't want the students to have to come in and be reminded of this teacher, by seeing her classroom every day. And the family had not come and gotten her stuff out of the classroom. It was downstairs. They put me and the students in an upstairs classroom. But the whole department was still sad and shook up about it. And there was a teacher's aide that came in a couple of periods into that classroom that was actually a close friend of this teacher that had passed away. And so after a few weeks, I was actually able to ask the aide. She had brought up that she had gotten the shots because she had underlying conditions, and she got them to be safe. And I said, so, did this teacher have the shots? And she said, fully vaccinated a month before she died. It's funny you asked that. And I said, why? And she said, because at the funeral, her boyfriend was telling everyone that he was certain it was the shots that had killed her. So there was that example right there. I was constantly hearing about, in other districts, I was hearing about teachers, and it was mostly that first 21, 22 school year that I heard about the most things happening with teachers. There was one school I had worked in that a teacher had died. Another teacher was on life support in the hospital, 50-something years old, had a stroke. And now keep in mind, I'm really, as a sub and somebody that's in and out of that building and not trying to draw a lot of attention to myself, I can't really just go around and question people this. I certainly can't ask people, were they vaccinated, unless I spend a lot of time in that school and there comes the right opportunity to. But I was hearing that first year, a lot of that in different schools. It wasn't this mass casualty event everywhere that would cause a closure or even an investigation. But I heard enough that first year that made me wonder if there was more happening that we weren't being told about. Also, that year that I subbed, I told you this in emails. I reacted very strongly to the shedding. It was especially bad that first year, where I would walk into a school and it would hit me in the face. It was like being slapped in the face with a mild case of sunburn is the best way to describe it. And I would walk into that school and I'd go, oh God, here we go again. I've reacted very, very strongly to certain people who, one of them was a teacher, and I actually did question her later. Nice lady. She had come in my room for an online meeting because the sound in her room didn't work. There were no students in there. And so she sat a few feet away from me listening to the principal talk. And I started reacting very strongly to her, where my eyes started to water, and then my throat started to feel funny, and then the inside of my mouth and my throat started to burn. And I actually went out in the hall and I called a close friend and I told him what was going on. I said, should I just leave? And he knows me really well. And he said, just the way he responded, I said, you don't believe me? You think I'm lying? He said, no, I think you've listened to too many shows like Sean's. And I think that maybe you're reacting mildly to something, maybe perfume or cologne, and it's going to your head. And I said, look, I understand how you would think that, but that's not what this is. I'm not looking for this. I'm in the middle of doing graves, and then all of a sudden I start feeling bad. And when I came home that afternoon, and he was also somebody that watches the dogs when I'm at work, and he had dropped the dogs off and was talking to me, and he's unvaccinated too. And he said, oh my God. And I said, what? He said, I'm reacting to you. He was getting the same symptoms, the burning throat, the watery eyes. And he said, that mild burn on your face? And I said, yes. He said, yeah, you need to go upstairs and wash your hair and get a shower. That was particularly bad that first year. I've noticed it some at the beginning of the year that I might react. But as the year goes on, I don't know if the shedding's fading or if I'm just getting used to it. And I don't notice it as much. Most of the people that I know that have told me they're not jabbed, they don't notice it like I notice it. I don't know if it was because I was a former smoker and I quit smoking in 2007, so I'm really sensitive to cigarette smoke, and maybe this is just something else that I'm hypersensitive to everything. But I definitely noticed the shedding. And that teacher that died, there was one particular day where I needed to get supplies out of her room, and another teacher let me into her room, and we're in her room, and I'm going through her file cabinet, and I get the same heavy reaction, the burning eyes, the burning throat. It was still in the air in this particular lady's classroom, and I had to leave. I had to leave after 10 minutes. It was just overpowering. Nobody else seems to notice this. So I don't, that's good and that's bad. Now, if I go online, I can find a lot of people that have reacted the same way that I have. I've got family members that are vaccinated. They seem to be fine. Actually, I'm the only living member of my family that I think that's non-vaccinated. And I'm not, my stepdad, I will say he's in his 80s. And recently the dentist told him he was going to have all his teeth removed. And his teeth were healthy before that. So I wonder if that's vaccine related. I've seen some students that this last school year that kept getting sick a lot. And I wondered if they were vaccinated, but of course I can't ask a student. It's none of my business, and that'll get me in a lot of trouble. Honestly, I've even stopped talking to faculty about it. That doesn't really go over very well.
That was kind of going to be my next question is do you communicate with faculty about any of this? Do they communicate this with you, and same with students? And then of course my next question is what have you witnessed among the student population regarding the shot taking?
Well, I don't know if you know this, but they were paying the students that first. The most incidents I noticed was that very first year after the shots rolled out, 21-22 school year, and most of the people in the school had been vaccinated that summer or before the school year started. They were at the time paying students $200 to get those shots. They had to get the second shot, and after they had gotten the second shot, then they got paid. And so for these students in a lot of places, $200 is a lot of money. And to them, this is just another vaccine. So the ones that did talk about it had said that. But even those conversations, they tended to get back to people upstairs. They've constantly been watching and monitoring what people say. And so I'm at the point now where I don't talk to teachers or students about it, because most of the teachers I can tell you are probably vaccinated. As far as the students, I would say, and I have asked students that are awake, as we like to call it, I have asked students what they think, and their response is they think it's the upper level ones. Maybe the seniors are vaccinated. They didn't think a lot of the freshmen and sophomores or even juniors as much were vaccinated. It was just the older ones, and it was when the shots first came out. And of course, when they were paying them $200.
Who was paying them $200?
The government. They once said, because I did ask a student volunteered that information that very first year when I was subbing, and he said that it was. I remember hearing about it on the news or reading about it in the paper that they got a $200 gift card once they had gotten that second shot. And a student had told me he wasn't going to get the shot until they offered the $200. So, hey, I could use that $200. And he says, I know, miss, I know that sounds sketchy as hell. But I said, have you, and I asked him, since he volunteered it, I said, have you had any reactions to it? He said, no, just a sore arm and, $200. So, yeah, I think it's a government program. The impression I got was that the government had money, probably from the Fauci and Gates of this world, and paid the students $200. That very first year it rolled around, they were getting paid $200 to get the shots. Everyone was.
So this is county health department stuff.
Correct.
What are you witnessing regarding any jab injuries? Are there any jab injuries where you are now among staff or students that you're hearing about anyway?
Not that I've noticed. No, not at all. I've had more students this year than I've ever had in my life, 227. It's a predominantly Hispanic. I say 98% of the population of the students is Hispanic. They've always had a tight sense of community, family values, even patriotism, whether it's to Mexico or America. I like working with this particular demographics, but I have not seen anything. I've been in this school since December. I have not had anybody fall out sick. I haven't gotten any emails about, that was the thing I saw last year. There were about 4 or 5 emails last year about former students that had graduated a year or 2 years before that had died unexpected of a heart attack. But the email, I didn't know the student, and the emails don't really go into detail. I'm lucky if I hear that it was a heart attack. A lot of times it was just died unexpectedly, and you have to ask questions to find out. But in this particular school, knock on wood, knock on counter, no, I have not heard any deaths. I have not had any students fall out sick. lot of sneezing and coughing this time of year, which was a little unexpected, but that may be related to the Wi-Fi and the electromagnetism in the air. Schools, like you said, it's a hotbed for it.
Yeah. Has there been, I wouldn't expect there to be, but has there been any acknowledgement among the staff or the administration on pushing the masks, pushing the shots, any apologies, anything like that?
Not at all. And there were staff teachers around me, it's in the same pod as me, that put on a mask and had it on for a week or two, and I had to bite my tongue. Say, this is their face. Let them put on what they want. But no apologies. I still feel like it's really best not to talk about it or not to bring it up. One thing that's been really surprising is the lack of conversation about any of this. In the last few years, I've made a point of sitting in a area for lunch, surrounded by other teachers, just because that was the whole point of subbing too, was to see what the other schools and the other districts were doing. And what was surprising was the lack of conversation about anything, about the shots, about the masks, about who's in the White House, the election fraud. They're not talking about any of this. And even the few times that I've even put feelers out just to try to bring something up, I get this negative light put on me. So, I just want to hang on a few more years until I retire and, enjoy the students and enjoy my profession. That's the whole reason I got into it. So I'm not saying anything. Out of 227 students this year, I think I've had one or two wear a mask consistently. Wow. So I'll take that.
Yeah. How about staff members? Are they still wearing masks? Some of them, anyway.
Some of them are. Some of them I was surprised, because they hadn't had a mask on all year long, and then I look and they're wearing a mask and they have it on for a week or two. But I think that's consistent with the big push about the bird flu.
Oh wow!
I just get the impression that they see that, so I just do what I've always done. I don't wear one, and I don't say anything. And that made a huge difference. Just that first year back as a long-term sub, the students saw me not wearing one. And it went from all of them wearing masks to the time I left or was asked to leave, because the administrators didn't really like that first year.
Yeah.
And you might have had 10% of the students wear a mask. So just seeing you every day and just seeing you not wear one, it does make an impression on them.
Let me go backwards in time and touch on a subject which I'm sure is a bit painful, but the business of course, I'm sure human resources getting involved with your termination. And for those listening, Sarah and I have been talking to each other over email. I want to say for what, maybe a year?
At least, yes, yeah. Absolutely.
And I remember all of your emails, of course, and you describing a bit of this story, but go back to when you first thought or first knew or were first told by them that they were coming after you because of, again, not wearing a mask. And then again, were there other reasons that they manufactured in order to get rid of you?
Not until I stopped wearing the mask. Once I stopped wearing the mask, then all of a sudden the students were questioned about my political beliefs. They even complained about the podcast I was listening to after school when I did my grades when there was no students in the room. I mean, they really started looking for stuff on me after they had put me on paid leave. Well, I guess the full progression was they didn't like the fact that I had gone to that January 6th rally. They knew I had gone there. They didn't like that. The principal had put out an email offering counseling services to any student that was traumatized by what they saw on TV. And of course, some of the teachers that knew I went were emailing and calling me saying, "What?" I said, "Guys, the news is lying. Don't believe it. That whole thing was a show, and nobody got shot inside the Capitol." And so all that went away. But the principals literally cornered me when I came back to class and said, "Do not talk about that. Do not talk about that to anyone." Around that time, I was, like I said, I was serving food and snacks in class just to show the students there was nothing to fear. I was better to show them than to say anything. And like I said, I had the fall, and I said, that's it. I'm not doing this anymore. The aide or spy, it's what I'll call him, who hardly ever got out of the seat, would run out of the room every time I took that mask off to teach. And so this went on. It didn't go on very long before the principal put me on leave. I want to say it went on for about a week. The nurse came into my classroom during the middle of class and pointed to her face, like, you got to put your mask on. And I went out in the hall and I shut the door and I told her everything I had gone through and the reasons that I just wasn't going to do this anymore. And the principal came into the room shortly after class let out and told me I was to leave the building. I was told by Human Resources that I needed to get an exemption. And
were you told this in an email, over the phone, in a meeting?
Well, when the principal told me to leave, he told me to report to the administration building right then. So that was my first stop on the way home. I went into the administration. They called me back into their office. I did not wear a mask. They did not ask me to. I think they knew better at that point than to push it. And they sat down and they had a long conversation with me, and I told them the reasons and the problems I had. And they said, okay, well, you got to get an exemption. Do you know what that is? And I didn't at the time. But I got the paperwork. I went home, and then Human Resources was calling me nearly daily, asking me how the exemption was going. And I said, well, I do have my dentist friend who owns the dental clinic who was perfectly willing to fill it out. But I had questions about, well, am I going to have to make the students wear a mask? Because the majority, I've got more students that have asthma than don't have asthma. And some of them are really struggling with this thing on their face. And I don't want to be told that they have to do this anymore. Well, that didn't go over well at all. They said, well, you're insubordinate. And they had also let it slip that they had 3 other teachers who had the same problem in the district, that they didn't want to wear the mask anymore. But after filling out the exemption, that they agreed to wear a handkerchief on their face.
Wow.
And so I said, well, I was not okay with wearing a handkerchief on my face. I was not okay with forcing the students to wear a mask if they didn't want to wear a mask. So unless those things could be addressed, there was no point in me filling out the exemption. So they shut off my access to my laptop because I was going to try to finish up some grades while I was home, and they completely cut it off. I could not even log in. And they would call me on my cell phone and on my personal email. I didn't have access to my work email anymore. They didn't want the parents reaching out to me. I know what that was about. That's what they do. They isolate.
Yep.
When they have it in for you, they isolate. They don't want you talking to anybody. But they would call me on my cell phone, and they would call me to come to a meeting. And I would come up to the meeting, and I would sit in the little waiting area, and they come up, they go, well, you have to wear a mask. And I said, I'm not wearing a mask. So they would kick me out. And then they tried to have an online meeting, and I said, okay, but I want this done through official channels. So let me on, because it's just a mouse click. Let me on and we can talk through official channels, through the teams that they had set up. They refused to do that. And I said, well, I knew what this was about. I've seen it happen to other people. I'm not going to be abused through having a meeting through my personal email. So I will be happy to talk to you, but it's got to be officially. It's got to either be in person or it's got to be through this school Teams messaging. And they wouldn't do that at all. They would call me on my cell phone, and it was the same thing. It was back and forth. I'd say, well, I'll come up there, but I'm not wearing a mask. Well, you have to wear a mask. I think I got kicked out 3 times before they stopped calling me to come up there. And, well, communicate with us online. Fine. If it's done officially through school network, no, we're not going to let you back on. And I never understood that, which told me that they were going to be abusive and hostile. That gave them an opportunity to deny it by refusing to communicate with me through official channels. So we went back and forth for a while on that, and then I just said, look, either allow me, meet with me, you can talk to me outside I'll meet with you outside at a picnic table, or, let me on the school network so I can communicate with you there. But other than that, you need to stop calling my cell phone and stop emailing me on my personal email, because that's harassment, and I'm going to have to ask you to stop. I filled out 4 grievances, and of course, all of those were denied. And the grievance, it was just very simple. I said I did not want to cover my face. I did not want to ask the students to cover their face. And I think that was it. But of course, those were both denied also. Like I said, I can send you the official paperwork. They had gotten statements from every student they could find and every teacher they could find. And the one complaint they had, other than insubordination, refusing to wear a mask, refusing to force the students to wear a mask, and this was the thing. They actually put this in the termination papers: excessive absences. Well, I didn't have any excessive absences until I was put on leave. But then they used the excessive absences as part of the reason for terminating me. So they did not have really any just cause. Like I said, they filled everything out. They filled out a binder, and there's an electronic version, and it's just full of fluff. I will be happy to send it to you.
Sure.
You'll fall asleep halfway through reading, I promise.
I know full well that they manufacture any complaint that they want in those reports when they just want someone gone. And again, it's usually the most morally sound, ethically sound people that they usually want gone. And they will throw anything on a wall to see if it sticks in those reports. And I mean, right down to manufacturing things that didn't even happen.
There's some of that in there too.
Yeah. It's amazing. Do you know of anybody else? I mean, of course, in their meeting, which, by the way, let me go back to that very quick. When you went into the administrative office and you were talking with them about all of this, and you weren't wearing a mask, were they?
I can't remember. I want to say once we got into the offices, no, I don't think they were.
Oh, that's hilarious. Okay. I mean, the irony is amazing. Or hypocrisy, too, I suppose. During that time, did you know of anybody else? Because they, as you said, they let it slip that there were at least 3 other teachers that were also experiencing the same thing. But do you know of anybody else who lost their job because they wouldn't wear the mask?
Not at that district. The only thing I heard was that I was the only one that refused. The other 3 teachers agreed to wear either a shield or a handkerchief on their face that had a problem. And they're back at work, blah, blah, blah. So not that I'm aware of, no. But it's also one of the better districts to work in. So I can see how a lot of people would get in line and follow it, whether they agreed with it or not. No, they did play favorites too. I would see some of the people and they had contributed a lot to the district. So I can see where they would be in a favorite position. But it wasn't uncommon to walk by their room and see a classroom full of students, and they were not wearing a mask, and nobody was saying anything to them.
Did you bring that up in any of your meetings with the administration or with HR?
I might have, but like I said, most of my meetings consisted getting kicked out of the meeting for not wearing a mask. So I didn't get a chance to bring up much in any of the follow-up meetings. I can laugh about it now because it is so ridiculous. Seeing who these people really are was a surprise. I really thought they cared more about the students than that. But that just shows right there, you offer somebody enough money, they'll sell out their own mother.
Can't help but think of the endless people who experienced the same thing that you did, because they're all over. I mean, they're all out there. There are numerous people who went through everything that you did too. And I fully understand that in moments like that, it's very difficult to believe that there are other people experiencing the same thing that you are, or that you did. But I'm certain that you were not alone in that, and I hope that you understand that too.
Oh no, I understand. I'm one of the lucky ones. I didn't go and get those shots, thinking that I had to, and now I can't get out of bed, or I'm in a permanent vegetative state. I am definitely one of the blessed and watched over ones. Yeah. And in spite of all of this, I mean, I'm closer to God than I have ever been. So I'm more grateful than anything else for what I went through. And if you hand everything over to God, God will make sure that you're okay. I mean, in my case, that's definitely been the case. Okay, God, I don't know what to do. I need your help. I'm going to let you take this, and you're in the driver's seat, and I'm just along for the ride. And what a ride it's been. You said in your school board speech that you thought the schools were going to shut down, and I haven't seen that happen. Do you think that's still on the table for later on?
You know, that's interesting. What happened in the district where I live is less than a month later. It was probably 2 or 3 weeks after I gave that speech. They did close, and they closed for at least a week because they had 25% of their staff sick, and they
Wow.
couldn't. I mean, they couldn't fill them with subs because no one wants to be a sub. So
It's not.
that was. I mean, that happened in that environment, which was interesting. They were forced to close for approximately a week, or it may have been 3 or 4 days, something like that. So I at least, I got the dig in before they had to actually take action. Where I live, I'm not sure if there have been any individuals who have worked for the district and actually died. I know endless people have left. I know that people have gotten sick. There are individuals who still get shots. There are people who are still bragging about it. I was hearing this from a friend who works in the local district, and they were saying, that there's, of course, they all know who I am, and they hate me, but they know that. I mean, they're basically still walking around bragging about getting shots, and then wishing that the unvaccinated would die.
Yeah, and there's enough people that still feel like that in the schools that I have to keep my mouth shut unless I want to spend another summer looking for a job. I've just got to focus on my students and the subject matter I teach. Oh, I do want to add one more thing, and this is just being an animal lover, and I listen to your show 3 times a week. I've had dogs for over 20 years, big dogs, and I can tell you from experience that those shots are negatively affecting them. They are shortening their lives. I had a German Shepherd, got her at 9 weeks old. This was back in 2010. Took her for that free exam. I was still asleep, and they proceeded, of course, to give her all her first year shot. She was loving. She was kind. She was um, very curious about other people. A month later, after I took her in for the shots, and I mean, her personality changed pretty much overnight, where she was aggressive to anyone that was not a family member. I mean, and I took her back to the vet a month later for her follow-up appointment, and they said, "How's that cute little puppy? She's still very young, and she's growling and snapping at them." And they said, "Whoa, you have got to put a stop to that. She is way too young to be acting like that." I said, I, my husband and I are both teachers. We don't raise our dogs to be vicious. We didn't do this. Never connected at the time that it was the shots. But these shots are very, very bad for our animals, and they are really bad on purebreds. I'm glad that we stuck with it, and we did our best. We hired a trainer. We got her socialized, but it was a years long process. Um, it's very, very isolating to have a big, strong guard dog type that you can't trust around other people,
Yeah.
that you have to cross the street. It gets you noticed by animal control. And I just want to warn all your listeners, please, please, please don't give these to your dogs, and especially not your purebreds. I can't tell you what to do, but I mean, the shelters here are just overflowing. And I'm sure a lot of them are well-intentioned people that got them vaccinated, and now their behavior is out of control, as well as their physical health. I mean, we had to put her down at 9 years because she couldn't walk anymore. Um, and we had stopped giving her vaccine, shortly after that, but it still shortened her life and changed her behavior. And I've just seen so many people's dogs now who they're not dying of old age. They're dying because they can't walk anymore. They can't put weight on their back legs. And I know it's really, the shots are a big cause of it. And be careful with the food you feed them too. I mean, your show has been so, so, so helpful, and it's so important. And I thank God every day that God put you in my path. But I do want your listeners to hear from my experience that these shots are very, very dangerous for dogs. Probably cats too.
Thank you for listening to American Education FM. Make sure and check out AmericanEducationFM.com for more information. Take care and God bless.